Hello, this is Dean Takahashi. I'm the lead writer for GamesBeat at VentureBeat, and I've been writing about games for about 24 years. And I also organize the GamesBeat Summit conferences that we do. And at our last one in January, we had Jason Rubin from Facebook speak, and we'll have him talk about some of the similar themes that brought up back then. But first, let's have Jason introduce himself.
Sure. Jason Rubin, my title is VP of Play, which is a really fun title. Started making games 35 years ago. The first game that I brought with my video game business partner, Andy Gavin, in 1985. Went on from there to continue to work with that company, renamed it Naughty Dog, released Crash Bandicoot, Jak and Daxter, eventually sold it to Sony Computer Entertainment. Worked with Sony for a long time. Great company, but decided to go off and kind of walk the earth. That eventually led me to becoming president of THQ. And then after that, very shortly after, I was invited down to look at what Oculus was working on and immediately fell in love with VR. Joined Oculus, was part of the acquisition team when Facebook acquired it. We built an internal publishing, developer relations, and kind of developer-facing organization inside Facebook. Signed some incredible titles that are now coming out and some that have already come out in VR. And then hired a gentleman named Mike Verdu, who I realized was the future leadership of that team. And I switched over to working at Facebook Gaming. Facebook Gaming is, you can think of the 2D games that are on the platform. So that includes Canvas, which is Farmville and all the games from back then, as well as Instant Games, which is our HTML5 instant platform, and the recently launched cloud platform.
And Mike, will you introduce yourself as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been making games for a really long time, starting out with traditional games on PC and console and franchises like Command and Conquer and Lord of the Rings. And then went to Zynga, worked on social games for the Facebook platform, which was a really interesting time because we were bringing hundreds of millions of people into gaming for their very first time. It was sort of like we were pushing the frontier of gaming out and bringing 500 million people in. After that, went to work on mobile games of various shapes and sizes. And throughout all of that time, throughout most of my career, I've been a VR skeptic, enchanted with the potential of the medium, but always thinking that it was 5 years away. And I thought that way until I tried the original Quest for the first time, which was in early 2019. Before it actually launched. And that converted me. It was such a breakthrough in so many ways that I did make the decision to join Oculus and work in VR full time. And actually that meant kind of abandoning a mobile startup that was just on the verge of getting going. That was the path that I was on in early 2019, and the Quest completely changed it. So going all in on VR was absolutely the right call. Looking at where we are now, it's such an honor and a privilege to be here overseeing the content for the platform.
So you resisted the temptations of VR a little longer than Jason did there.
That's right.
Yeah. So Jason, last time we talked about overcoming barriers that stand in the way of people enjoying games and the games business in general. I wonder if you could talk more about that theme.
Yeah, absolutely. Accessibility is a huge part of why games have been successful on Facebook in the past. I think when Canvas launched and Mike and his team at Zynga brought Farmville and those kind of games to the platform, a whole new audience that had never played games before suddenly started playing in earnest. They're still playing on the platform. There's 30 million some odd monthly active users here 10 plus years later on Canvas that are still enjoying those games. But the world moved to mobile and Facebook again wanted that accessibility. So we created the Instant Games platform, which has 350 million monthly active users currently, to deliver HTML5 based games to the masses. And a huge number of people come and play those games, but being HTML5 and downloading each and every time you play, they can only be so big and they can only be so complex. So what we're doing to bring that accessibility kind of into the modern age is we've launched a cloud platform which is ever expanding, that allows us to deliver either PC or mobile titles using your favorite engine, whether it's Unreal or Unity or your own custom engine for that matter. High quality graphics, again, with no download, and they're all free to play. So users can come onto the platform, try multiple things in a row, see what works for them, and really very low barrier to entry. Works on your desktop, your laptop, works on your mobile phone. And if you love the games and you want to download and install them, that's great too. Our cross-play functionality lets you bring all of your progress with you. So accessibility is the foundation of gaming on Facebook.
Mm-hmm. So, Mike, I'd like you to give us a sort of like a download of what's going on at Oculus as well. But maybe first, you also want to address, this mission of overcoming barriers as well at Oculus. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. The reason that I fell in love, that it was like this transcendent experience to try the Quest, is in a word: accessibility. No PC and no tether and no external sensors to fiddle with. Seconds to fun. No messing around with like drivers on the PC. Like it is a seamless experience, and you're just seconds away from being in VR when you put on the headset. And I just knew that Quest had the potential to reach millions of people, to bring them into VR, because accessibility is the key. And by the way, accessibility extends beyond the hardware. It's also in the genres of content where we're seeing new categories gain traction, like fitness. And we care about diversity of creators and content so that we have titles that are appealing and relevant to everyone. And our Oculus Launchpad and Oculus Start programs are so important to this mission as well, bringing diverse creators into VR. So I think you can see, accessibility has many dimensions, and accessibility as a concept is absolutely a North Star for us.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So I guess the thing that is interesting you share in common is this decision to curate content, I guess both on the Quest Store and with Facebook's Instant Games. What's some of the thinking behind that? Let's start with Mike on this one, the thinking behind curation at Oculus.
So the vast majority of people who are buying a Quest or a Quest 2, they're new to VR. Like, this is a new thing for them. And we want them to have a great experience in this new medium, almost no matter what they choose to download from the store. So we want them to keep coming back to VR, to try a lot of new games and apps and feel, again, good enough about that experience or those experiences that they keep trying new stuff after that. The way we build trust and comfort in this new medium is to ensure a consistent level of quality for apps in the store. That helps our users and it helps our developers. It's so important to us that developers succeed on Quest. If developers are making money, they'll invest in new games and apps, and that drives selection and diversity of content and innovation. And we do see that Quest users are buying more apps relative to other platforms. I think curation is actually a good part of the reason why. Now, Jason made the call to curate for Quest, and I strongly support the decision. I think we're seeing the benefits for both users and developers. And I will end on this topic just by saying that it's in spite of everything I just said about curation, it's really important to give developers a way to reach users with their content, even if they're not able yet to get their games and apps on the store. So we just rolled out App Lab, which gives developers this new channel to ship apps directly to consumers. It's not Surface in the store, but the developer can provide links to users, and there are some mechanisms for discovery off platform, and it just gives developers so much freedom to bring cool new stuff onto the platform. It's off to a great start. We're looking forward to seeing what kind of innovation developers will bring using this new channel.
Mm-hmm. And Jason, you've carried over this curation decision from Oculus to Facebook Instant Games as well. Can you talk about why you wanted to do that?
That's right. We're moving over the next few months to move towards higher quality curated content. That isn't to say that we're looking for bigger developers or publishers. That isn't to say that we're looking for a specific type of title. We're not making artistic judgments, but there's some fundamental things that anyone who looks at a piece of software can say, hey, this is going to entertain somebody, or this was clearly not made to entertain somebody. It was made to test an idea or worse. And what we found time and time again, and this is a universal truth, is that even though it may be counterintuitive, restricting the amount of stuff that goes into a platform to be only the higher quality things is better for all of the three parties involved. It's better for consumers because they know they can trust whatever they try is going to be quality. They find fun things faster, and they know that they won't be taken advantage of. That allows them to spend more on titles because they feel comfortable doing so. That is exactly what happened on Quest, and I believe it's going to happen on our Instant Games platform. It's better for developers, at least the developers that are on the platform trying to create quality. If you set a quality bar, generally developers compete to be better quality than everybody else, more entertaining, giving more than everybody else. Whereas if you don't set a quality bar, people tend to experiment and it's a race to the bottom, search engine optimization, or worse. So it's better for the developers that do want to make quality titles, and they end up making more money because they have happy consumers that are willing to spend. And ultimately, that's better for the platform holder, especially a Facebook that cares very deeply that people don't find something that's low quality or worse, offensive, on their platform. So the transition will be what transitions always are, a little rocky. But when we get to the end of this, we think it's going to create an ecosystem like it did on Quest that really sets everybody up to win. And again, we welcome every developer. We just want quality to be that bar.
And I guess we could use a progress report here. I guess Oculus recently announced that you have more than 60 titles that have made more than $1 million on Quest. And I wonder, how sustainable is this going forward? And what are you hoping, will sort of be your next milestone, I guess? Mike?
So that's that. It still makes me happy. Even hearing you say it, it's thrilling. That's 1 in 3 paid apps on the store on a young platform, and 6 more apps cleared 10 million in life-to-date revenue, and those are just good numbers on any platform. So it's humbling and exciting and wonderful. I feel like we actually don't celebrate developer success enough. It's such a recent development that VR has become a real business. I remember in my talk at OC6 in 2019, we were starting to see the glimmers of developer success, and VR did finally seem like it was becoming viable for developers at scale. That momentum increased during 2020, and at Facebook Connect last year, we celebrated a whole bunch more milestones of developer success. Now, after a strong Quest 2 launch, we're seeing even more acceleration. So it seems sustainable. It seems to be a trend that we can put weight on. The momentum is increasing. I'd actually say, pick your metaphor. The flywheel is spinning faster. The rocket ship is near escape velocity. Any way you want to say it, we're getting close to a self-sustaining ecosystem, and that's pretty cool. By the way, our best advocates are developers, and a little while later, you'll hear from Denny Unger of Cloudhead Games, and they made Pistol Whip, which is an incredibly fun game, by the way. And he's going to talk about his company's experience with a platform and how we've unlocked some things for him.
Yeah, it's amazing. I remember the first time that a title passed 1 million in gross, and the team celebrating because it was such a milestone. And that's not 5 years ago. That's probably 4 or 5 years ago, somewhere in that range. And here we are, right, with so many titles that are now passing 10 million. And you see the trajectory. It's just going to keep going. So the naysayers that said it wouldn't work, that then said it would only work for a handful of titles, that are now saying that, yes, but that isn't AAA, the trajectory, the path is clear. We're going to get there.
Now, instant games are monetized in a different way here, Jason. Like, what do you see as milestones ahead for instant games?
Yeah, instant games tend to be free to play. Again, they're opening that barrier to as many possible people. That doesn't tend to work on platforms that have small user bases because free to play just doesn't work unless there's scale. But it works very well on our platforms at scale on Facebook. So advertising is a big part of the monetization for a lot of these games. And let's not underappreciate advertising. If you ask many consumers, would you rather watch an ad, especially an ad targeted for something you would like, or would you rather pay for a game? I think most consumers would say, the vast majority, I'd rather watch ads. I grew up on television that worked that way, and it works really well for a lot of people. More dedicated players tend to want to pay, and that's great. And certainly when you get to more core gamers, they're more than willing to pay. Well, we have in-app purchases, which are a bigger and bigger part of our business, at least where it's allowed, like on web and on Google Play. And that is driving a lot of revenue for a lot of developers. So developers have the choice how they monetize. They can monetize through IAP, they can monetize through IAA. And also later, we're going to have a developer, Michael Carter of Playco, who's going to come talk about some of the success that they've had on the platform. They're one of our biggest developers. They've been a fan of post-App Store gaming for a long time. And I'm excited for everyone to hear them talk a little bit about their journey.
Mm-hmm. And we've talked a lot about instant games too. What about cloud games and the role that they're playing and your expectations for how they're going to do things?
Yeah, the cloud game product is doing really, really well. It's really it's great for consumers because it's a pain in the neck to download some of these titles. They're quite large. So being able to click and seconds later play the game is a massive upside for trying things. And we think the more consumers try, the more likely are they to find something that they really like. And in the long run, those are consumers that are going to spend more, which is good for developers, and consumers are doing it because they love the games. It's also great as an advertising platform to be able to say, hey, here's a game, take a shot at it, try it, and have the person be able to do it on Facebook without leaving Facebook to go to an app store. Because the person came to Facebook to check in with their friends in the first place. So I'll give it a little time. Yeah, this is a great game. Now I'm sucked into it. Or I'm not interested. I'm back at Facebook is a lot more convenient for consumers than jumping all the way into an app store, going through entering your username and password, downloading it. You don't have the memory. You know the rigmarole. We can get around all of that. So we think it's great for consumers. It's great for developers as well. And again, we allow monetization through IAP, which in the case of a lot of games that have come from mobile, works perfectly well for them because that's the business model that they're running under. But we also allow in-app ads. And a lot of the developers here and there have placed ads in, and they're seeing revenue come in earlier on their titles in some cases because people are watching the ads. So it's really up to the developer what they do. And again, if the developer then decides, look, we'd rather move this person onto an install to get a home screen icon, an IAP on iOS or whatever, that's fine with us too. That's great. We're part of the journey. The player can go play, bring all their progression and assets with them. And if they come back to Facebook, it all comes back with them as well. So it's really a circle they can go back and forth. So net, we think it's one platform. All the games are instant. Some of them are cloud. Some of them are HTML5. Consumers probably don't care. It really depends on what game you're building and how wide a reach you want, because obviously we have to have servers near consumers for the cloud product, whereas we're currently shipping all over the world with HTML5. So that's really the decision.
I'm kind of curious how you also just sort of see the importance of games right now. We're still locked down, and it feels like we've got a very interesting opportunity at the moment, or a kind of mission to make people happy right now. And I'm curious how you see this opportunity, and maybe what you would encourage the industry to do. Jason, you want to tackle that?
Yeah, it's obviously this has been an incredibly hard year, but gaming, I think, has been one of the bright lights to people. And put aside for a second what it's doing to usage and everything else, revenue, things like that. That's not really relevant when you're talking about the amount of pain that people are suffering. I'm not a big fan of my daughter kind of anecdotes, but this is a my daughter anecdote. My daughter's social life has been the snippets she gets in her online classes and playing Roblox while using Messenger with her friends. And that Roblox experience and the ability to be with their friends, albeit virtually, I think is actually vital in her last year's social progress and in her ability to get through what has been an incredibly nasty period of time. And I think to a certain extent, more or less, a whole lot of people are having some bit of that, whether it's playing games alone just to fill the time or playing games, I think, more and more with other people to have that social connection and be able to do something with someone as opposed to just talk to them, through VC like this. I just think games have been, thankfully we had games going into this, right? I think that's the best way to look at it.
And Mike, how do you feel about that too? It feels like games are moving from this distraction or diversion to something vital for everybody.
Yeah, and with VR, we have an immersive medium like no other. We can actually physically transport you to another place. And what a blessing and a gift that we can give when people are trapped at home. It's actually been very rewarding to see how people are using VR to not just escape their current circumstances, but also connect with other people in virtual places, usually around a shared context like playing a game. But I do see it as an acceleration of a trend that was happening anyway. I'm not sure that it's all going to just disappear because we exit lockdowns and return to normal. I do think that the medium for escape and connection will be a touchstone for people and an important part of their daily lives. It's been great to see the response and see people jump into VR, even if the reasons during 2020 and the early part of this year may not be so happy.
Yeah. So I guess developers have lots of choices. There's a lot of competition in games. Curious what sets Facebook apart. Jason, do you want to tackle it?
That's a good question. And I think what we're going to go through is a little bit of a journey on my side of the world, which is, again, the 2D surfaces that Facebook has. I think initially, the reason that people are going to want to bring their titles to Facebook is that it's going to reduce the cost of installs because it's so much easier to get someone to try a game on platform than it is to try a game by going to an app store and downloading. I think it's going to increase lifetime values by allowing developers to see some social spread to their games. For example, people saying, posts that say, your friend is playing this, your friend just got this high score in this game, or just inviting people directly to join you and play in a game, because there's nothing better than having a friend tell you something's good. There's nobody you believe more than someone you trust telling you to do something. Ads will never take the place of that. So I think initially it's really, it's just a business model expansion. I think as we move forward, developers are going to find that there are capabilities that Facebook brings to gaming and capabilities that we bring to their games that they really want to tap into. And there's an app store world where people go to an app store, they download, they have a few friends, end of story. I think the post-app store world, which is things spreading socially through messages, through posts and things like that, that if the two can combine, and a lot of mobile games aren't using that post-app store virality, that if you get that post-app store virality on top of your app store expertise, that you're going to see yet another uptick in usage, as well as a lot of people playing with their friends, which again is an engagement lever that is so much more powerful than people playing with people they don't know. So I think over time, Facebook will become more and more part of game design. And people will look to say, if I'm putting my game on the Facebook platform, how can I take advantage of the fact that the average person has so many friends when we start? I don't have to build a social graph. The social graph's there. I don't have to build chat. The chat is there. And it's not a chat in a game. It's a chat that they look to talk to their friends. So when their friend posts, you want to play with me, they'll look at it immediately because that's what people use to communicate. So I think it's going to be a journey. At first we're we're a way to find additional audience. And in the long run, I think we're going to have a material impact on the way games are designed.
And Mike, what's your own view of what sets Facebook apart?
Well, certainly the investment we're making in the platforms that are giving birth to an entire new medium. I mean, we do want to provide the very best experiences to consumers on the best devices. Beyond that, I would say actually it's the promise of seamless and frictionless social, and Jason alluded to that. But games are inherently social, and they're actually a shared activity around which there can be a lot of very rich and complex social interaction, which is quite exciting, and I think is the future direction of VR actually. So yeah, I think what we can do for VR, and then the connection that we can offer with other people set us apart.
Very good. And Jason and Mike, thank you. Is there anything else you want to talk about? Anything else you want to add? Go ahead, Jason.
Sure. I don't have anything top of mind, but I do, I want to thank you for doing this, of course. Like, we've had a bunch of conversations, and I always find them amazing. I also want to thank the industry again for my sanity over COVID, and as well as I said, my daughters. I think we all, it is a business, and we're obviously in a business, but I do think we have to take a moment of reflection and just say, I think we were a big part of getting through the last year, and hopefully not that much more time, and we're back to reality. But I do think as an industry, we owe it to ourselves to say, we did it. This was a big moment for us. So I do want to say that.
Mm-hmm. Oh, thank you. And Mike, any other thoughts as well?
Yeah, I wanted to riff a little bit more on social, because it's such a topic of the moment. It's been the promise of VR for a long time. Feeling the sense of presence with somebody else or a group of people in a virtual place is so powerful. And sort of like, I talk about developer success being this sort of watershed moment for the entire VR industry. I feel the same way about social. And social, as we talked about, it kind of took off in VR with COVID and the lockdowns. But it is, expanding and to the point where some of the apps with the most time spent on the platform are social. And what's the face of this social revolution? It's Beat Saber multiplayer. It's Onward, which is a team-based first-person shooter. It's Population 1, which brings Battle Royale to VR. It's Echo VR, which feels a little bit like sort of Ender's Game on the Quest. It's Rec Room. It's VR Chat. And I'm finally seeing something in VR that I've been waiting to see for a while, and it's really exciting. And that's that, people are scheduling time to be together in VR, to meet each other at a time in a virtual place. So maybe they can jump into a game on the same team, or share time together in an app like Rec Room. But it's clear they want to connect, they want to play together, they want to share an experience, and that's just that's a profound development for our medium. So very, very excited to see that continue, and I do think it's the future. Yeah, I think VR is just inherently social. So that along with the success that our developers are having, two things that excite me a great deal about the future. And I will also, like Jason, just extend a thank you to all the developers who helped get through this very hard year and figure out new ways of working together to ship games and apps under incredibly challenging circumstances. The platform wouldn't be what it is without you, and we deeply, deeply appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Mike and Jason. And please stick around. We have our developer spotlights coming up next.
I'm Denny Younger, the CEO and creative director at Cloudhead Games. Just some quick history. Cloudhead has been around since pre-2012, DK1 days, trying to figure out, what VR is as a medium and how we can best build experiences for it. I'm an old school garage VR hacker guy, and when this thing came around, the DK1, I got extremely excited because for the first time, there was a technology in VR that was actually doing the thing that it promised to do. So back then, this was only 3'd off. You could only rotate your head. So we had limitations. But what's been really interesting over the last 8 years is seeing the progression and growth of the technology, taking us from this to a completely standalone device in the Quest with no cord, no tether, and no computer required. And that's been a real game changer for the industry as a whole, as a real important kind of key tipping point for the market, but also for us as designers. We went through that progression of trying to understand how best to build experiences for the format. And every 6 months, there was a new piece of hardware. A new capability would open up in front of us. So, Cloudhead innovated on things like snap turns. We worked with Oculus's perceptual psychologists to come up with a system that would get around rotational vection. When we got full 6 degrees of freedom, and we had to come up with a new way of moving through virtual spaces. So we ended up inventing something called blink locomotion, which is essentially teleportation. And, trying to figure out how you would build even some kind of fencing so people could perceptually understand where their physical space was versus their virtual space. These things came out in 2 products that we made, Call of the Starseed and Heart of the Emberstone, an adventure series that came out on early versions of Oculus. And those were really informative for us as a studio, trying to figure out, what the secret sauce was, what's actually fun in the medium. And, all of that ultimately led us to building Pistol Whip and having a better understanding of what's actually working in this format for consumers, what's fun for them, and why. So when we finally got our hands on a really early prototype of the Quest 1, a few things stuck out to us. The big takeaway was that this was the first time that a VR technology had really removed the major friction points that consumers had with previous generations of hardware. Because it was standalone, didn't require a PC, but could hook up to a PC, didn't have a cord, had full 6 degrees of freedom, had motion controllers, inside-out tracking. All of these things were just, nailing some of the key critical points that consumers had with the previous generation. And when we tried it for ourselves, the thing that stuck out the most was the sense of freedom that having that full stack of tech capabilities really gave us as designers. We could start forgetting about certain things that we had to worry about prior. And what I see in the market since then, especially in 2020, we saw this amazing expansion and growth of fitness and really active VR products. And, Cloudhead has always believed in active VR. We've always had a really strong emphasis on standing experiences where you get your body involved within that motion. So when we thought about what kind of product would ideally work with the Quest, it really came back to how do we engage a user physically in an experience in a way that they didn't have to think about. So really about engaging the user's lizard brain, the reactive mind, instead of trying to overload them with instructions on how to do a thing. It should be more about instinctual reaction. So that was kind of at the core. How do we make someone feel cool and look cool while they're playing a game in a way that they don't have to think about? One of the other design considerations for Pistol Whip was how to handle locomotion. Because we wanted the user to be really active in a almost unconscious way, we also wanted to remove any cognitive load associated with locomotion. Just how do I move forward in an environment, in a world? So we actually put the user on a constant rate of motion, a constant acceleration value that never changes, so that they can focus mostly on what's coming at them and less about how to get there. That set velocity is at a very specific value. You also have to make sure that the environment itself isn't giving you too much visual information to overstimulate those areas of your perception that might make you feel off balance or uneasy. So we did things like remove texture load from geo in the environment. We also made sure that most of the action was happening in your 180 degrees specifically, so that there wasn't a lot of turning around to try to track somebody and getting a bunch of sideways moving vection. We also made sure to hide start and stop points within each of these scenes. So you never get that sort of slow progression to your set velocity. It's always hidden. Those are just some of the tricks you kind of have to employ to make sure that even though you're moving forward in a virtual environment, you're maintaining comfort, always maintaining comfort. So one of the things we've seen since 2019 is just how important Quest was for the VR market. It quickly shifted away from VR being a novelty into VR having a real utility in people's lives. And I say that not because, we've had good sales, we have. And we've really benefited as a company because of that. I say that because retention is high. People aren't just playing an experience and then throwing their headset in a drawer. People are picking up the headset again and again to have repeated experiences or to get back into the programs that they love the most. It's an important distinction. And to me, that is the one signal that really amplifies VR as a tipping point technology. I feel like we've crossed that threshold because Quest, as an all-in-one affordable device that incorporates all of these amazing technologies, has finally hit that sweet spot for consumers. And what that means for me as a developer for Cloudhead is growth. It means that we can support the products that we're building for the ecosystem in a much more poignant way. We can take those risks that we might not have been able to do prior. We can amplify the support, not in a responsible way, but we can make sure that the people that work for us are well supported and the products that we are building for the market are equally well supported. And because that shift is also occurring in the market, it is just building further confidence in VR as a whole. So, for example, we have plenty of updates that we're doing to Pistol Whip, but it's also enabled us as a studio to do something that we've always wanted to do, which is a thing called Labs, which it's a division of Cloudhead that lets us experiment more deeply with VR as a technology. Back in December of 2020, we released our first cinematic campaign for Pistol Whip. It was called 2089, and it was set in the future. It had a very kind of snappy story mode, tying it all together, 5 scenes. There's new weapons, new modifiers, a boss battle, and it was really well received. People were really happy with the work the studio did, and I'm so proud of the team for building that. We're working on another one, no surprise there. Again, 5 scenes, new modifiers, new weapons, new bosses, and it takes us into the past. It revolves around the past, and it's going to be a wild ride, and you can infer whatever you want from that. But we're also working on Concierge, which is a system that dives really deep into modifiers and making Pistol Whip an even more accessible experience to like a whole ton of different ways of playing the game. So we have so much more to push into Pistol Whip over the next year and likely beyond that. That's one great thing we're seeing about the VR market in general is that titles that do well, they do well for a really long time, especially if they're well supported. And we're certainly going to do that, along with a bunch of other things and stuff that I can't even talk about. So thanks for having me. I really appreciate having the time to talk about our journey with Oculus and our journey in VR in general. Thanks, and we'll talk to you soon.
So Michael, maybe you could introduce Playco, tell us a little bit about yourself, tell us a bit about the company, give us an introduction.
Hey, Jason, great to be here. At Playco, our vision is to bring the world closer together through gaming. And we think it's actually really hard for 2 people who are friends or colleagues or family to play a game together. In 30 seconds, you can get on a game with a stranger today. And then when you're sitting down to set up a game to play with 4 or 5 of your close friends, actually it takes quite a bit of time. And so we think that in this sort of world today, people expect, sort of an up leveling of their connectivity. They expect to be able to just turn something on and then be there with their friends in that shared experience. And so, Playco, when we think about how do we bring the world closer together through play, sort of our mission to do that is to build a game or a series of games that very large audiences all play at the same time. So instead of a game where you have 100 million people in the world playing it, we're trying to figure out how do you build a game that 1 billion people will play or 2 billion people will play. And in doing so, we think we can bring the world a lot closer together.
Yeah, and you've been working on the Facebook platform for a lot longer than I have been. I came from VR, as you know, before this. So you were making games on the Instant Games platform years ago. What does Facebook have that's the unique opportunity that lets you kind of go after what you just said, that massive audience? And what is it about Facebook that attracted you in the first place?
So yeah, that's a great question. Either sort of with Playco or in sort of previous companies or incarnations, I and some of my colleagues have been involved in the Facebook platform for a long time, going on 5 or 6 years now. And the reason why we've spent so much time with the platform is when we think about Playco's vision and the mission here, which is to bring the world closer together through play, and to operationalize that by building a game 1 billion people will play with their friends and family. The decisions we make as a company, they start with, can we achieve that end goal with a certain strategy? So we think about new platforms and we think about ecosystems. And when we look at Facebook, it's very unique in being a place where we can achieve that kind of scale, not in 20 years or 10 years or 5 years or something, but right now. It's achievable today because already, substantially, the majority or all of the world's, connected internet population is in Facebook, in a Facebook product. And they already exist and they're already connected. And so for us to come in and access an audience of that size, it would be extremely rare, very, very, very rare to do by trying to build it ourselves and trying to do our own distribution and build our own game and release it through the App Store or other means. We can come to Facebook and access the world's largest audience all in one spot. And that's really powerful.
That is. And I know you haven't hit 1 billion people yet, but we were talking earlier and you've come kind of close on a handful of games. Like, do you have any statistics that you could share with everybody, just like, how far you've come and how close you are to that dream of 1 billion?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So across our portfolio, we've had more than 500 million unique players, so 500 million installs in our games through the Facebook platform. And we've been able to do it with relatively small teams, building sort of creative works that a huge portion of the world's population access. So in many ways, we feel like we've already sort of unlocked a big step towards that vision, and we're sort of already there today.
Yeah, and another thing that we've talked about, which I found like really interesting when I kind of joined Facebook Games, and you were one of the people that really explained the platform to me best, oddly coming from outside of Facebook. But one of the things you talked about is, finding clusters of people when you're spreading games, which I found incredibly interesting because most games, they get a user and then that user builds their friend list. Whereas with Facebook, you have the graph. So you're using that to kind of jump into clusters that are already created and you're focusing on that. Can you kind of share a little more about that? Because I thought it was absolutely different than anything that I had ever dealt with before.
Yeah, absolutely. There's sort of two major aspects to this that I want to talk about. So when I look at existing distribution platforms, particularly on mobile, there's sort of this unbundled nature of the connectivity of the graph and then the means of distribution. They don't come together, and so you have to go out first and achieve a certain level of distribution. You have to basically acquire users at scale for sort of increasingly large sort of cost per install. And so when it comes to Facebook, there's this really unique aspect of the platform where the way in which you distribute the game through a social app automatically comes with that very thing that's so hard to build, which is a social graph. And so what you're looking for is to be able to have the game be distributed and discovered in an authentic way between friends and family. And so you can still do paid acquisition, right? Like people are interested in seeing ads, or interested in tapping ads, or just in trying new things out. That's already how the ecosystem works, and they do that. But once they like a game and they're really interested in it, then they might take that game to one of their friends and say, "Hey, let's play this together." Except they know that being able to play this game together is something that's actually really easy. Like, the way we look at it is it's the one platform where we feel like realistically you get games that like Gen Z can play with their grandparents because they're both there, and there's no sort of huge amount of technical troubleshooting you have to do to kind of get your grandparents to figure out how to play. It's just like, well, if you know how to tap the screen on the phone, then you know how to play a social game, whereas that's just not true anywhere else. And so what we think about is, how do we find games that can be discovered authentically, between friends and be enjoyed by a really broad audience? And then very quickly we get these clusters of players where, unlike sort of typical mobile game marketing, you acquire a user out alone. It's like, okay, this person on a ranch in Texas really likes your game, and they're going to play, and then sort of this one other random person in Saudi Arabia is going to download and play your game. Instead, with Facebook, it's like, okay, people are discovering these games in groups and clusters, and that creates a really interesting reinforcing behavior where when enough people in a cluster start playing a game, then that's what draws them in. It's not necessarily the game itself that draws people back. It's spending time with their friends, spending time with their family, right? And so the game just starts to become a little more of a backdrop or a kind of a canvas, a way to kind of create a context for how you spend time together. But at the end of the day, you can't really do this anywhere else than kind of a social network where the games load instantly. And that's the Facebook Instant Gaming platform.
Yeah, and I guess that's part of my next question, which, you like to talk about a post-App Store reality, right? There's nothing wrong with app stores, and certainly Facebook has one, and we're working hard on improving it and look to update it in a few months. But that's actually not that interesting to you. It's nice to have it, but for you, the App Store isn't the entry point, isn't really what you're about. You're a post-App Store game. Can you kind of elaborate on that and explain?
When we talk about the post-App Store, there's a lot of times where people refer to the post, whatever world. And the thing I want to point out is it's not like some apocalypse, like, the very next day there's no App Store and now we have something new. Usually it's like a layering on top of what we already have. And so, we don't think people will stop playing and discovering games through the App Store necessarily, but that they'll expect sort of to be able to discover and play games in much more authentic and different ways than they currently do. And so it's much more about how do people discover and play games, and doing that through recommendations of your friends, and because you want to play with your friends, it's sort of a different type of intent, where we're sort of in the App Store, your intent is, maybe I've got some time and I want to find a way to fill it, or, I know I like games, I want to kind of look around and find a game. It's much more focused on like the content as the first class citizen, whereas in the post App Store, the way you discover is different. You're thinking about, for example, with social networks, you're thinking about who you want to spend time with, and like that's kind of what you're trying to decide by. It's like, oh, I want to spend time with my family, and that's a very natural thing when we're sort of disconnected in the world today, and a lot of our lives have gone online. Then what we're trying to do is find a way to spend time together. And then kind of the second part of that is you say, oh, and like, here's a game that we can play once you've already decided that what you want to do is spend time with your parents, or other family members or friends. And so in that way, I think the post App Store really just talks about like what's good for players, like, what do they want and how do they want to experience the world together? And we know they want to experience the world together. And so now it's just a matter of, how can they experience the world together through games? And how can they play together? And that's actually why we named the company Playco, because ultimately that's what people want to do. They want to play games together, and that's what we want to do. We want to help them play games together all around the world.
Awesome. So maybe before we go, maybe you can talk about some of the games that you haven't yet released or just recently been released, kind of your new stuff, and where you think you're going to go in the future. That would be awesome. We see what you're working on.
Yeah, absolutely. So the way we think about games is, number one, it comes down to like, how can it be social? How can people play together? And what's interesting is there's all sorts of different ways that people communicate. They communicate by writing a message into a messenger. They communicate on an audio call. They communicate through like a one-on-one video chat, through a group video chat. So generally speaking, we always sit down and look at what are the social channels when people want to interact with each other. How are they doing it, and then how can we layer games into that medium? So this also includes the whole wide range of things, including stories or posts on Facebook or whatever. And there's many social channels in the Facebook ecosystem. And then the sort of second thing we think about is how can a game be very broad in terms of who would be willing to play it. And so it comes back to this idea of can someone in Gen Z play a game with their grandparents? That's a very broad, wide-ranging demographic. And so we tend to build games that we think people can play together no matter their sort of natural skill level. And it's much more about having fun with other people as opposed to, sort of going out alone and sort of getting to some really deep, sort of complicated part of the game. And so with that in mind, we're looking at different industries, or different sort of IPs and genres that is very broadly appealing, including like match 3 games, including sort of board games and board game themes. We're looking at kind of famous TV shows that everybody knows. And so this is the sort of IP that we think works really, really well on the platform because we're just removing the friction. And so it's easy to find the game, it's easy to understand the game, it's easy to play the game. And I think so we've probably got maybe 5 to 10 games coming out that we've invested seriously in, over the next 6 months.
That's awesome. Thanks a lot. I'm sure everybody is looking forward to seeing them. And really, thank you for coming and telling us about what you're working on.
Thanks, Jason. This was a pleasure.